Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. The Blood Annihilation world was a legacy magic from the Bloodstream sect's middle peak, and could only be fully unleashed by a Foundation establishment cultivator. However, even when Song Ke was only a Qi condensation disciple, he had still been able to use some of its might. Now that he had reached Earthstring Foundation establishment, he was able to fully unleash it. Even the first form was terrifying. The sword slashed down, and the beam of blood-colored sword light seemed to surpass everything around it, becoming the only thing in heaven and earth as it slashed down toward Bai Xiaochun. Close examination would reveal that the blood sword was a stream of sword qi, bright and scintillating, seemingly capable of slicing through anything and everything. When Bai Xiaochun's little wooden sword blocked its path, it shattered into pieces. It didn't matter that the little wooden sword had a threefold spirit enhancement, completely transforming its base material, it was destroyed in an instant. The golden crow sword was of higher quality, and had also benefited from the fundamental transformation of a threefold spirit enhancement. When the blood sword hit it, it was flung off to the side. Song Ke howled, madness filling his eyes, as well as supreme self-confidence. Back in his first fight with Bai Xiaochun, he hadn't resorted to using this inverse blood sword form, mostly because his cultivation base was insufficient. But now he could use it. This was his most powerful trump card, and in order to ensure that it was successful, he had even used his final precious blood sphere to injure Bai Xiaochun. Only then did he resort to the inverse blood sword form. Only then was he absolutely certain he would succeed. Give me that heaven string energy or die. When cultivators fought, it was often important to resort to scheming and tricks. But sometimes, it wasn't necessary to put too much thought into such things. Sometimes, you just needed to find the right moment to weaken your opponent, and then unleash your most powerful attack. Song Ke was also supremely confident that his secret magic of restoration would heal his wounds in a very short time. Once he returned to his full battle prowess, he was sure that he would have no trouble seizing victory. However, even as his sword descended, a strange look flickered through Bai Xiaochun's eyes. There was something very strange about this blood sword, and yet, there was no time to ponder the matter at the moment. Suddenly, the fading golden light that emanated from him increased in intensity as he reached his two fingers out toward Song Ke's throat. Apparently, he was willing to end the battle in mutual defeat. Song Ke's face flickered, but then twisted with vicious ferocity. Instead of evading, he sped up. The blood sword slashed down onto Bai Xiaochun's shoulder, and at the same time, Bai Xiaochun's two fingers closed in on Song Ke's throat. A cracking sound rang out. Song Ke's neck suddenly turned blurry, and an afterimage appeared. As a result, Bai Xiaochun's attack hit nothing but thin air. At the same time, as Song Ke's sword lashed into Bai Xiaochun's shoulder, golden light exploded up. All of the power of his undying gold skin focused on fighting back against the sword. Apparently, the sword was completely neutralized. Apparently, the power of the sword couldn't match Bai Xiaochun's defensive power. Both Song Ke and Bai Xiaochun were stunned. However, neither hesitated. Both of them were aware that the other was certainly fully prepared, and as such, unleashed their follow-up techniques. Inverse blood seal. Song Ke howled. His blood qi sword collapsed, transforming into countless blood-colored sealing marks, which then flew out toward Bai Xiaochun and then exploded. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun's throat-crushing grasp transformed into an incantation gesture. Waving his finger at Song Ke, he unleashed the might of the Violet Qi Cauldron control art. He didn't utilize Violet Qi Cauldron summoning, nor lightness and heaviness. Instead, he used something that he had failed at over and over again, but had never abandoned, the human-controlling grand magic. Back on the North Bank, he had never been able to perfect his human-controlling grand magic. He had never been able to exert full control even over the small animals. At best, he had produced some random effects on their limbs. However, at this moment, he didn't need full control, he wanted a random effect. As the control magic was unleashed, Song Ke's arms and legs suddenly didn't seem to be coordinating with each other. He felt like someone had pushed him hard from behind, and he staggered and almost fell over. His expression flickered as he realized that his body was under the influence of something else. Furthermore, the next attack was heading, not toward his throat, but his dantian region. All of this takes some time to describe, but actually occurred in the time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint. Rumbling sounds filled the air as the blood seals exploded around Bai Xiaochun, causing him to cough up several mouthfuls of blood. At the same time, he unleashed the throat-crushing grasp in the direction of Song Ke's abdomen, where his dantian region was. Song Ke was scared out of his mind. The Dantian region was extremely important. Although a blow there wouldn't necessarily be fatal, it was the location of his spiritual seas, as well as the heaven string energy. He tried to spin to the side, but Bai Xiaochun's throat-crushing grasp suddenly erupted with a powerful gravitational force. Instantly, Bai Xiaochun's right hand, backed by the power of the throat-crushing grasp, stabbed into Song Ke's abdomen, piercing deep into the flesh and blood, all the way into the spiritual seas in his dantian. Song Ke let out an agonized shriek. If Bai Xiaochun squeezed his fingers down with the power of the throat-crushing grasp, then the Song Ke's spiritual seas could be destroyed. Any ordinary person in such circumstances wouldn't have the clarity of mind to defend themselves. They would be unable to escape the fate of having their spiritual seas destroyed. But Song Ke was widely regarded as the #1 chosen of the bloodstream sect. He was anything but ordinary. It was a moment of profound crisis, and yet he was profoundly decisive. Therefore, he immediately flushed all of the heaven string energy in his body directly toward his dantian region and Bai Xiaochun's right hand. He was using the heaven string energy as an attack. Intense power battered his dantian region, causing cracking sounds to emanate out as fractures spread out through all of his 8 spiritual seas. However, at the same time, massive force exploded onto Bai Xiaochun's right hand. Song Ke was abandoning the heaven string energy and even damaging his spiritual seas, all to shove Bai Xiaochun's hand away. Thankfully for him, his spiritual seas weren't destroyed. Face ashen, coughing up blood, he didn't hesitate to flee at top speed. Despite his pain and how weak he was, he produced a jade slip which he then viciously crushed. Instantly, all of the energy nodes he had linked together through the fallen sword world began to crack apart. Those cracks rapidly began to spread across the surface of the entire sword. Originally, Song Ke would never have been able to do such a thing. However, the reason why the enormous sword had remained intact for so long was because of the heaven string energy. Now that the heaven string energy was gone, its powers were fading. The sword had already been tilted on its side, but now that the strange spell formation created by the bloodstream sect had been activated, the entire sword was collapsing. Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered as he examined the complete strand of heaven string energy in his hand. Without any further hesitation, he began to absorb it through his palm. As it coursed into his dantian region and combined with the previous portion of heaven string energy, a heaven-shaking, earth-toppling energy surged out inside of him. A Heaven-Dao aura erupted out, something profoundly holy, something that could destroy mountains and dry up seas. It filled the world, causing the scattered remnants of the disciples of the 4 sects to be completely and utterly shaken. Shockingly, an enormous face had appeared up in midair, in the same direction the aura was coming from. That face belonged to Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. Off in the distance, Song Ke spit more blood out of his mouth as he sped along. When he saw what was happening, he looked up hatefully at the enormous version of Bai Xiaochun's face. Eyes bloodshot, he clenched his hands into fists so hard that his fingernails dug into his own skin. Blood started dripping down, and yet, he didn't notice. Bai Xiaochun. Even as everyone watched, shaken, filled with mixed emotions, the aura of Heaven-Dao in Bai Xiaochun's dantian region grew stronger and stronger. His 9 spiritual seas were rapidly turning golden, although the process would clearly take a few days to complete. Once that happened, and they were completely gold, that would mean that Bai Xiaochun had truly reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. As of this moment, his cultivation base, his latent power, his longevity, were all rising rapidly. At the same time, he could sense that something momentous was occurring within the fallen sword world. Even more astonishing was that, for some reason, he had the feeling that further up beyond the current sky, there was an even more ancient heaven and earth, something profoundly primordial. The feeling vanished only a moment later. At first, Bai Xiaochun had been on the verge of chasing after Song Ke, to take advantage of his moment of weakness to kill him. But once Song Ke smashed the jade slip, destroying the energy nodes, everything in the entire fallen sword world changed. Intense cracking sounds rang out, as loud as claps of thunder. Huge crevices appeared, spreading out across sky and land alike. Mountains began to crumble, and plains split apart. Everything started crumbling. The disciples present were completely shaken. The whole world was falling apart. This is bad. What's happening? Heavens! Don't tell me the fallen sword world is going to collapse. Meanwhile, outside of the fallen sword abyss, Master Snakescale, Ouyang Jia, and the elders from the Profound Stream sect and Pill Stream sect were all sitting there cross-legged in meditation. There was still 1 more month left before the Holy Land was to be opened up. Suddenly, all of their faces flickered as they looked over toward the huge sword. Already, massive cracks could be seen spreading out over its surface. What happened? The fallen sword is breaking apart. Damn it, not even we can get inside. All of them were shocked, and almost couldn't believe that the enormous sword would really collapse. They even tried to enter, but it was impossible. All four of them were thinking the same thing. Back when the sword was discovered, the patriarchs of the four sects set up teleportation formations. If the world collapses, they'll be activated. However, we have no way of knowing if the disciples will be sent back to the sect, or somewhere else in the vicinity. Back in the fallen sword world, the ground continued to crumble. At the same time, four enormous spell formations appeared, and the power of teleportation exploded out, spreading to touch all of the disciples. Because the disciples of the different sects cultivated different techniques, their auras were different, and as such, they were teleported out by different formations. One by one, the disciples were enveloped by teleportation power and whisked away. Bai Xiaochun was among them. As he looked around at the shocking catastrophe, he thought back to what Yang Jia had said, and did nothing to resist the power. In the blink of an eye, his vision went dark, and the power of teleportation was pulling him away. However, at that very moment, a little hand reached out, as if to prevent him from leaving. "Why don't you stay and play with me, sweetie?" Bai Xiaochun's scalp tingled in fear, and his eyes went wide. A pale hand reached out, belonging to a young girl in a white dress. She wore a ferocious, enigmatic smile on her face. Her face was half covered by her long black hair, making her look even more terrifying than she might have normally. An aura of death pulsed off of her, transforming into something that looked like vipers seeking to bore into Bai Xiaochun's eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and even his pores. However, just when the hand was about to touch him, his 9 spiritual seas erupted with a Heaven-Dao aura, and the aura of death collapsed. The hissing snakes were wiped away, and the girl's hand withered, revealing dead skin and sticky, dripping blood. It was terrifying to the extreme. The girl let out a begrudging howl that echoed out into the air. At the same time, the teleportation power surrounding Bai Xiaochun exploded out with full force, and he vanished from the fallen sword world. After all of the disciples from the four sects were gone, the fallen sword world continued to collapse. But then, something else happened. Massive amounts of hazy gray mist billowed out and began to fill the world. It was rife with an aura of death, and smelled like rot. Even the 4 powerful teleportation formations crumbled into ruins because of the rotting aura. In the blink of an eye, the entire world became a domain of ghosts. Howls rose up from within the mists. Apparently, all of the Bane souls which had existed in the world were now beginning to awaken. Strangely, the huge sword stopped crumbling. In the outside world, Yang Jia and the others saw the sword cease crumbling, and watched as black mist begin to pulse out of it. They exchanged dismayed glances. However, a moment later, they tried once again to enter the sword, and this time had no problem doing so. As they entered, they could still sense a fading holy aura. That aura, heaven string energy. That's heaven string energy. Even as their faces flickered with shock, the sinister voice of a young girl rose up from the mists below. It sounded bizarre and cruel, and filled the entire world. "The heaven string energy hath been harvested by your disciples. Henceforth, this place shall be called the 9 Serenities Ghost Domain. In the future, do not set foot in this place. Any who violate this prescript will have their entire sect exterminated." As soon as the voice rang out, Yang Jia and the others coughed up mouthfuls of blood. The voice crashed in their ears like thunder as they were forcefully ejected from the world. "Bene Spirit," they cried in alarm. The pressure they felt was something that exceeded the nascent soul stage. Trembling, hearts battered by waves of shock, they retreated at full speed, simultaneously sending word back to their sects. The fallen sword world has been transformed into the 9 Serenities Ghost Domain. Furthermore, one of the Bane souls awakened and became a Bane spirit. The heaven string energy was taken away? Who? Which disciple of which sect got it? Does that mean someone reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment? Even as they fled, the former fallen sword world, which was now the 9 Serenities Ghost Domain, filled up with mist. Standing in the mist was a girl in a white dress, holding a skinless, shrunken version of Lei Shan. At first she was looking up into the sky, but then she lowered her eyes to gaze at the tens of thousands of Bane souls in the area. All of them were prostrating themselves to her. Not a single sound could be heard. As for Lei Shan, his eyes were filled with incredible terror and pain. Standing next to the girl in the white dress was a pretty young woman with expressionless eyes, a puppet. She was none other than Gongsun Wanner. There was no poison upon her anymore, nor any centipedes. The human-faced spider had transformed into mist and vanished. She was now completely clean and empty, inside and out. "Ah, you don't want to stay and play with me, sweetie," the girl said, her voice sinister and bizarre. "Well, that's fine. I'll be able to leave this place soon, then I can come find you. I'll show you how pretty this new dress of mine is." The girl chuckled and looked over at Gongsun Wanner. The fact that the fallen sword world had been transformed into the Nine Serenities ghost domain was a major event in the eastern lower reaches of the cultivation world. What had once been a foundation establishment Holy Land was now a domain of terror. Furthermore, one of the Bane souls had awakened and turned into a terrifying, sentient Bane spirit. Even the elders of the four sects were left jumpy at the thought of it. However, there was nothing that could be done about the matter. Although the matter would influence the four sects to some degree, it wasn't a huge loss. Furthermore, it was a joint loss to all four sects. What was most astonishing of all was the information confirmed by the voice of the girl: the Heaven String energy had been taken. That meant someone must have reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. Who was it? Which sect and which disciple got the Heaven String energy? Damn it, if it was one of the other three sects, that means they'll have a Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment disciple. We need to kill that person when they're weak. If they reach core formation, they'll be a force not easily stopped. It was definitely our bloodstream sect. Ha ha ha, now we have both Patriarch Limitless and another top-level cultivator. The four elders immediately used transmission jade slips to get the information back to their sects as quickly as possible. At the same time, they tried to make contact with the disciples who had been teleported out of the fallen sword world. Unfortunately, they soon found that the fluctuations caused by the teleportation made communication impossible. Soon, the Bloodstream sect, Profound Stream sect, Spirit Stream sect and Pill Stream sect were sent a huge commotion. Even the patriarchs of the sect were shaken. Large numbers of Foundation establishment Dharma protectors and elders were dispatched. Even prime elders were sent out. No effort was spared to track down the disciples who had been teleported out to random locations. All they had to do was find one disciple, and they should be able to get information about what had occurred in the fallen sword world. Most importantly, everyone wanted to know who got the Heaven String energy. In the Spirit Stream sect, the founding patriarch personally passed down orders which sent countless inner sect disciples and Foundation establishment elders into action. Even outer sect disciples were called upon. They flew out from both the South Bank and the North Bank, spreading out with one mission: find the disciples who had been teleported out of the fallen sword abyss. As soon as a single one was located, they were to report back to the sect immediately. The first person to be located was not one of the numerous disciples from the Spirit Stream sect, but rather, one of the 5 remaining Pill Stream sect disciples. The Pill Stream sect had sent 80 disciples into the fallen sword world, and more than 90% of them had been killed. Luckily for the Pill Stream sect, one of the 5 disciples who made it out alive happened to be teleported to a location just outside of the Pill Stream sect itself. When the Pill Stream sect elders and sect leader arrived, they found an extremely weak disciple, his energy almost completely drained. Fellow disciples immediately supported him, pouring their own spiritual power into him so that he could speak. Trembling, eyes flickering with fear, he weakly explained, "Dead. They're all dead. Eldest brother Fang Lin was killed. Zhao Ru is also dead. All of them were exterminated by Bai Xiaochun from the Spirit Stream sect. Bai Xiaochun completed 9 tide flows. He and Song Ke fought over the Heaven String energy, and he reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment." The disciples' words left the Pill Stream sect cultivators, and even the elders and the sect leader, completely shaken. Gasps could be heard, and eyes went wide with disbelief. Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment, Bai Xiaochun? Spirit Stream sect? The sect leader's eyes flickered, and he grimly said, "Immediately send word to all of our spies in the Spirit Stream sect. Tell them to find Bai Xiaochun and kill him. Spare no effort whatsoever." The Pill Stream sect ordered all of their spies into action, hoping to be the first to find Bai Xiaochun. If they did, they would spare no cost whatsoever to kill him. As for the other 3 sects, they mobilized large forces to search for the disciples who were currently missing. As all that was happening, something else occurred on the Eastwood continent, in a jungle-covered mountain range not too far from Eastwood City. Next to one particularly large tree, the air rippled with teleportation fluctuations, and then Bai Xiaochun appeared, staggering out at a near run. As soon as he was out in the open, he leaned over and vomited noisily. What kind of teleportation was that supposed to be? Nearly lost my poor little life in the process. Bai Xiaochun's face was ashen, and he was panting. What he didn't know was that past teleportations he had experienced had been performed with weakened teleportation power in order to make them as comfortable as possible. In contrast, the teleportation which had pulled him out of the fallen sword abyss was fully powered. All of the portals set up by the 4 sects were like that. In a moment of grave crisis, the most important thing was to teleport the targets out as quickly as possible. A forcible teleportation like that would actually knock most people unconscious. After emptying his stomach, Bai Xiaochun felt a bit better, although he was still so dizzy that he was seeing stars. Leaning up against the tree, he looked around and realized he had no idea where he was. From what Elder Yang Jia had explained, he knew that he could be just about anywhere. I should be back on the Eastwood continent though, he thought, massaging his temples. Then he recalled the little hand and the strange voice he had heard just before being teleported away, and his heart filled with fear. Trembling, he resolved to never, ever go back to the fallen sword abyss. Still trying to catch his breath, he sat down on a nearby log and looked down at his tattered garments. By this point, they were so damaged and blood-stained it wasn't even possible to identify them as the robes of the Spirit Stream sect. He wanted to change them, but unfortunately, didn't have a spare set in his bag of holding. The fallen sword abyss was so brutal. As he thought back to everything that had occurred, his scalp began to tingle. What was especially frightening was how everyone had almost gone insane in their desire to kill him. And then there was the vicious, savage battle with Song Ke. In the end, he sighed. Why do cultivators always end up fighting and killing? Sighing, he probed his cultivation base, and found that his roiling spiritual seas were gradually turning golden. By this point, the process was about 30% complete. Ha ha ha. Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. In his excitement, he forgot about the brutality of the fallen sword world. The idea of 500 years of longevity caused his eyes to shine. Flicking his sleeve and sticking his chin up, he proudly said, I, Bai Xiaochun, am truly a consummate chosen. Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. After laughing loudly for a while, he cleared his throat. I guess I should probably go figure out where I am. Something else he found interesting was that although his cultivation base was getting stronger and stronger, the aura it emitted was getting weaker and weaker. It was almost as if, because his spiritual seas were climbing to the Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment level, all of the pressure and energy they would normally radiate was now focusing inward. At the moment, anyone who sensed his aura would place him at the 9th level of qi condensation. As the process continued, he had the feeling that his cultivation base aura would eventually disappear altogether, and he would seem like a mortal. Only when the process was complete would he experience a heaven-rending, earth-crushing explosion of power. It should be finished in 2 days or so, he thought excitedly. With that, he put the matters of his cultivation base aside. Next, he produced a jade slip to try to transmit a message to the sect. Unfortunately, the jade slip had been damaged during the teleportation process. Although the teleportation energy had already faded away, it seemed that he would temporarily be unable to make contact with the sect. Feeling a bit annoyed, he put the jade slip away and then transformed into a beam of light that shot up into the sky and then off into the distance. It didn't take long for him to realize that with his current cultivation base power, he could fly much more quickly than before. He was soon out of the mountain range, whereupon he caught sight of an enormous city off in the distance. The city walls were very imposing, and were constructed from greenish-colored bricks. Furthermore, each and every brick seemed to be inscribed with magical symbols that formed a spell formation. The spell formation sent light streaming up high into the sky, seemingly connecting the city to the heavens themselves. A huge green vortex could be seen up above, with lightning occasionally dancing back and forth within it. There was also pressure weighing down which restricted the cultivation bases of any cultivators that entered the city, making it impossible for them to fly. The city was huge, enough to house at least 10 million people, and had 4 main gates which were constantly packed with floods of people going in and out. In front of each of the city gates were enormous stone stels, inscribed with calligraphy as flamboyant as dancing dragons and swirling phoenixes. Eastwood City. Bai Xiaochun gaped in shock for a moment, and then his eyes lit up. This was the biggest city in the territory controlled by the Spirit Stream sect. It was actually considered part of the Spirit Stream sect, and was operated by the 10 most powerful cultivator clans on the Eastwood continent. It had a history stretching back 10,000 years, and was home to not only hosts of cultivators but mortals as well. In addition to the 10 great cultivator clans, there was also a disciple of the Spirit Stream sect stationed there as an official emissary, responsible for keeping the peace among the clans. That was the exact position Du Lingfei had been sent here years ago to fill. Although she only had a qi condensation cultivation base, she represented the Foundation establishment elder who was also stationed there. The elder rarely made public appearances, leaving most of the duties to Du Lingfei to handle. Her primary task was to keep the 10 great clans in check. Elder sister Du was sent here a while back as an emissary. I haven't seen her in such a long time. Bai Xiaochun's heart warmed at the thought of Du Lingfei, and he couldn't help but picture her looking shy and angry at the same time. I can't just walk straight in. I'll sneak in incognito and check things out first. After all these years, I wonder if my boo stepped out on me and found another man. Eyebrow cocked craftily, he shot through the air toward Eastwood City. 1. In Chinese, Bai Xiaochun gives Du Lingfei a nickname that is a play on words based on her surname. It actually sounds very cute in Chinese, the type of nickname that you would give to your lover, wife. I'm using boo, since it rhymes with du, and is also a cutesy nickname. As he neared, he could sense that flying was restricted. How annoying. I'm a prestige disciple. I'm the junior brother of the sect leader. Eastwood City belongs to the Spirit Stream sect, so therefore, it's mine by right. I can't believe I'm not allowed to fly. Grumbling all the way, he landed on the ground and headed toward the city gate. There was quite a line, and he didn't feel right cutting in front, so he went to the back. Before long, he worked his way up to the gate itself, where he paid a small spirit stone tax to enter. No one paid much attention to him. All they cared about was the spirit stones. Apparently, they were confident that no one would cause any trouble. Eastwood City is so big. I can't believe they still charge a spirit stone tax to get in. Bai Xiaochun was not very pleased about what was happening. Considering his status, it was really a loss of face. Coughing dryly, he clasped his hands behind his back and strutted through the gate. Once inside, the sight of the countless towering buildings caused him to gasp. Everything was huge. The roads were paved with limestone, every slab of which emanated spiritual energy. The buildings were decorated with gold and jade, carved with dragons and phoenixes, and were completely extraordinary to behold. Everything was festooned with beautiful pearls and spirit stones. The glow of magic rose up everywhere, creating an air of luxury that almost physically buffeted Bai Xiaochun in the face. This place. He swallowed as he took in the beauty and luxury. Vehicles trundled back and forth in the streets, and people could be seen everywhere. He almost felt like he was in a different world. As for the residents of the city, they dressed in silks and satins, and looked very impressive as they walked to and fro. Regardless of the level of their cultivation base, they seemed very proud and lofty. Unlike the mortals in smaller cities and villages, the mortals here didn't seem scared or impressed at all by the cultivators around them. As he walked along, Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but gasp in shock at all the things he was seeing. After all, he had been raised in a village, and after that, spent all his time in the sect. He had never been to a big city like this before. Of course, considering how he was looking around, he stuck out from the crowd, and the passing cultivators looked over with disdainful expressions, taking him to be a country bumpkin. Some of them noticed how his clothing was ripped and torn, and even stained with blood. Realizing that he was probably someone that shouldn't be provoked, they quickly got out of his way. I never could have imagined how incredible this place is. The more he saw, the more excited he got. The sheer luxury of the place caused him to sigh, and he was already trying to figure out how to get the sect to transfer him here. Continuing to sigh, he passed one certain shop, and was suddenly riveted in place. It was a clothing shop, filled with garments of every color and style possible, all of them beautifully tailored and embroidered. Even the lowest quality garments were amazingly crafted. Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but muse that the clothing here was far, far better looking than anything from back in the sect. Eyes shining, he walked into the shop. There were a few people inside, browsing through the selection of clothing. As soon as Bai Xiaochun entered, a couple of them looked over, and when they saw his dilapidated robes, looks of derision appeared on their faces. However, they could sense the aura of the 7th level of qi condensation on him, so they quickly looked away. There was one young man, dressed in luxurious garments, whose eyes went wide as soon as he saw Bai Xiaochun. For a brief moment, a strange gleam could be seen in his eyes before he averted his gaze. Meanwhile, a smiling salesperson approached Bai Xiaochun and began to show him around. This heavenly dragon robe is made from heaven water anaconda skin. After being cured with 81 types of medicinal plants, it was decorated by a grandmaster of embroidery. There's a spell formation hidden inside that provides resistance against all water-type magical techniques. Oh, that 1,000 leaves coat is crafted from 1,000 different types of spirit leaves. A secret magic was used to tailor it, and when you wear it, you'll be surrounded by the fragrance of plants and vegetation. After wearing it for some time, you'll naturally exude the fragrance of spirit medicine. Oh, this piece. Bai Xiaochun nodded, feeling a garment here and there, falling in love with everything he looked at. At the same time, the young man in the luxurious garments finally looked up. Smiling, he walked over to Bai Xiaochun, clasped hands and bowed. Salutations, brother. Surprised, Bai Xiaochun turned to look at the young man. I am your humble servant, Hu Yunqing, the young man said politely, a broad smile covering his face. I happen to be the owner of this little shop. Brother, I can see that you're an extraordinary person, a dragon amongst men. If you see something you like, brother, just take it, on the house. Think of it as a gift between friends. 1. Back in chapter 144, Hu Yunfei mentioned Hu Yunqing, a close relative in his clan. Are you serious? Bai Xiaochun looked at Hu Yunqing, blinking. Of course I'm serious. Hu Yunqing never lies. Bai Xiaochun responded with a sarcastic chuckle. Having no reason to refuse a free gift, he casually pointed at the heavenly dragon robe. The salesperson looked at Hu Yunqing, who smiled and nodded. The salesperson shrugged in disbelief as he handed the heavenly dragon robe over to Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun threw it on, and immediately looked completely different than before. Hu Yunqing laughed heartily and said, Brother, the heavenly dragon robe definitely suits you perfectly. It almost looks as if it was custom-tailored just for you. You really know how to pick clothes for yourself. You think so too? Bai Xiaochun replied, smoothing out the robe. He was very pleased, and couldn't help but think that the clothes they wore back at the sect were far too shabby. He had already fallen in love with this new world of luxury and sensual pleasure. Hu Yunqing was so taken aback by Bai Xiaochun's response that he didn't know what to say next. Finally, he cleared his throat and changed the subject. Brother, there's a banquet tonight here in Eastwood City. Emissary Du Lingfei from the Spirit Stream sect has reached the end of her commission and will be returning to her sect, so a big banquet is being held in her honor. If you don't have anything else to do, brother, why don't you come along? It'll be a lot of fun. Bai Xiaochun looked at Hu Yunqing with an enigmatic smile for a moment and then voiced his agreement. Hu Yunqing knew that he was being a bit presumptuous, but also wanted to take advantage of the golden opportunity which had presented itself, and didn't have time to come up with any better tactics. Smiling, he led Bai Xiaochun out of the shop and onto the street. As soon as they stepped out, Bai Xiaochun noticed that they were being followed by 8 bodyguards, all of whom were in the 5th level of qi condensation. They were rogue cultivators, but they clearly were adept killers, as they radiated powerful murderous auras. Hu Yunqing looked at Bai Xiaochun out of the corner of his eye and said, You know, Emissary Du Lingfei from the Spirit Stream sect is as beautiful as an immortal. Not only is her cultivation base very high, she's spectacularly good-looking. In fact, she's one of the top 10 goddesses in the Eastwood continent. With her as emissary here, the 10 clans maintained completely harmonious relations. Not a single problem ever cropped up. She handled her duties with great finesse. This was Bai Xiaochun's first time hearing about Du Lingfei's affairs in Eastwood City, and he was immediately intrigued. She sounds incredible. Oh, she's incredible, all right. Very incredible. Famous young men from cultivator clans all over the Eastwood continent have tried to earn her favor. In my opinion, though, there isn't a single clan that's worthy of her. Only few people in the Spirit Stream sect itself could be counted deserving. To be honest, there's really only one person good enough for her. Hu Yunqing sighed. Who's that? Bai Xiaochun asked, blinking. Oh, he's a rare chosen in the Spirit Stream sect, the type that only comes along once every 10,000 years. He's a prestige disciple, and the junior brother of the sect leader. His name has rocked both the north and south banks of the Spirit Stream sect, and he's popular among countless disciples. His name is Bai Xiaochun. Hu Yunqing's expression was one of reverence, although he seemed to be working hard to suppress his zeal. As for the bodyguards, they all had strange expressions on their faces. They had worked for Hu Yunqing for many years, but this was their first time hearing him speak like this. They couldn't help but look over at Bai Xiaochun, curiosity gnawing at their hearts. Bai Xiaochun coughed dryly. Looking very thoughtful, he said, You're right, Bai Xiaochun truly is extraordinary. Then he gave Hu Yunqing another enigmatic smile. Either Hu Yunqing didn't notice Bai Xiaochun's thoughtful look, or he did notice and pretended not to. Extraordinary? He continued excitedly. He's more than that. He's a true chosen, a superstar, the type of person all the female disciples in the Spirit Stream sect want as a Taoist partner. As for the male disciples, they all want to be his friend. He's the jewel of the Spirit Stream sect. I've even heard some people say that after coming back from the Foundation Establishment Holy Lands, he's reached Earthstring Foundation Establishment. A person like that is like a full moon on a dark night. All people can do is look up at him in amazement. What a pity that my own latent talent is just average. Otherwise, I'd go looking for him myself and offer to be his follower for life, to be at his beck and call at all hours of the day. Bai Xiaochun was almost blushing by this point. However, Hu Yunqing seemed really caught up in his excitement, and Bai Xiaochun didn't want to interrupt him. Therefore, he allowed him to keep speaking in this vein for quite some time, even giving him an encouraging look now and then. Hu Yunqing kept it up all the way to the banquet, coming up with new and flowery ways to praise Bai Xiaochun the entire time. At one point, he ran out of things to say, but Bai Xiaochun gave him an encouraging look, and he gritted his teeth and racked his brains to come up with more. The non-stop talking was rather exhausting. As Bai Xiaochun and Hu Yunqing were heading toward the banquet, large numbers of disciples and elders from the Spirit Stream sect were out scouring the Eastwood continent. Their main goal was to track down the disciples who had been teleported out of the fallen sword abyss, and find out what exactly had occurred. A group of inner sect disciples was making their way along the edge of a jungle when they happened to find a disciple who had been knocked unconscious during the teleportation process. They quickly revived him. The first words that came out of his mouth were enough to shock all of the rescuers. Sect Uncle Bai Xiaochun reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. The words struck the hearts of the listeners like bolts of lightning. All of them gasped. It was earth-shattering news, so without the slightest hesitation, they sent messages back to the sect. Soon, more and more disciples who had been teleported out of the fallen sword abyss turned up. Furthermore, the news that was getting sent back to the sect was all the same. Bai Xiaochun had reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. He had struck despair into the hearts of the disciples of the other three sects. He had slaughtered Zhao Ru and Fang Lin of the Pill Stream sect, had seriously injured 9 Isles, had successfully wrested all the Heaven String energy from Song Ke, and had risen to Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. Some people were even saying that he had killed Lei Shan from the Profound Stream sect. As the information trickled back, the Spirit Stream sect was thrown into a huge commotion. The elders, the 7 peak lords, the sect leader, all of them were both stunned and, at the same time, wildly elated. Earlier, they had been nervous, unsure of which disciple from which sect had reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. In fact, many had been convinced that it would be someone from the Bloodstream sect. Word had even been sent to the spies in the Bloodstream sect to try to kill certain disciples there. But now, everyone was shaken to find that the person who had reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment actually came from the Spirit Stream sect. And it was Bai Xiaochun. Li Qinghao and the sect leader were beside themselves with joy. The prime elders were completely shaken. Next, the entire sect was mobilized with one mission. Find Bai Xiaochun. Immediately send word back to the sect if you do. Protect him and escort him home. At the same time, the Spirit Stream sect locked down all disciples who were suspected of being spies. They were well aware that once the other 3 sects got word of what had occurred, they would do anything to try to kill Bai Xiaochun. The cultivator clans in the area were closely connected to the Spirit Stream sect, and as such, it was essentially impossible to keep word from spreading. Soon, everyone had caught wind of what was going on. The patriarchs of the various clans were completely shaken. Eyes bloodshot, they sent the members of their clans out in all directions to try to find Bai Xiaochun. After all, they knew that he could have been teleported anywhere on the Eastwood continent. If they got lucky and he was teleported into their territory, and they found him first, they would be able to invite him to visit their clan personally. That would be a huge honor in and of itself, considering he was a Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment cultivator now. There would also be the possibility of some of their clan members striking up friendships with him, which would also be of enormous benefit to the clan. Even more enticing than that, though, was the possibility that Bai Xiaochun might take a liking to one of the female clan members, and take her as a Taoist partner. If that happened, not even the sect leader would be able to do anything about it. Dispatch everyone. Find him. Bai Xiaochun might have been teleported into our territory. As the cultivator clans were dispatching people to search, Bai Xiaochun and Hu Yunqing finally arrived at the banquet. It was being hosted in a sprawling mansion that covered over 10 acres of land. The walls were magnificently decorated, and the grounds were filled with pine trees and decorative rock formations. In one area near the center, pavilions had been set up, as well as a 3-story pagoda that looked almost like a palace. Decorated with dragons and phoenixes, it was tasteful and elegant, yet clearly wildly expensive. A din of voices could be heard, and servants bustled back and forth carrying all sorts of fine liquor and fresh fruit to the elegantly attired guests. There were well over 100 guests present, men and women, young and old. Some sat alone, others in groups of 3 to 5. Guards were posted at the main entrance, where a valet cheerfully greeted the new arrivals. For those he didn't recognize, he would accept their invitation cards, make a record of their arrival, and then show them inside. As soon as Hu Yunqing appeared, the valet greeted him respectfully and escorted him inside. Bai Xiaochun walked along by his side, looking around curiously at the banquet. This was his first time attending such an affair. One of the first things he saw was a muscular man off in the distance, chatting and laughing with a pretty young woman as they all walked along toward Hu Yunqing. The man wore a long violet robe that was clearly very expensive. His face had a healthy glow to it, and he wore rings of holding on all of his fingers. 7 or 8 jade pendants could be seen on his person, and he looked every bit like a rich playboy. The young woman wore makeup that made her seem young and pure. However, there was something about her that made it obvious she was a paid courtesan, which lessened her appeal. Overall, though, she was quite beautiful. Smiling, the burly man hurried over to lead Hu Yunqing to a nearby table. "Brother Yunqing, I've been waiting for you. Come, come, have a seat with me." Only when Hu Yunqing gave an apologetic look to Bai Xiaochun did the burly man finally notice him. "You must be new around here," he said with a smile. "But you're a guest nonetheless. Any friend of Yunqing's is a friend of mine. I'm Li Yudao. This banquet is being held by my Li clan in honor of emissary Lingfei. It was a bit rushed, so things aren't as well planned out as they should have been. Please, forgive me for any inadequacies." Looking very pleased with himself, he pulled Hu Yunqing and Bai Xiaochun over to the tables, where they all sat down. The young woman sat down quietly next to Li Yudao, looking very lovely and demure. "Things really were far too rushed," Li Yudao said. "The only beverage I could get my hands on was this spirit alcohol brewed from Tier 1 high-grade spirit medicine. If I'd had more time, I could definitely have procured some product made from Tier 2 high-grade spirit medicine." He sighed, and yet, it was impossible for him to cover up the look of pride on his face. He and Hu Yunqing had been secretly competing with each other for years, and at long last he had this chance to put him in his place. It was at this point that the young woman sitting next to Li Yudao spoke up. "Yudao," she said flirtatiously, "don't be so modest. It would be hard to find another clan in the Eastwood continent that would entertain so many people with spirit alcohol brewed from Tier 1 high-grade spirit medicine. Even a small glass could be sold for several hundred spirit stones." Her flattery was like music to Li Yudao's ears. What are a few hundred spirit stones?" he said. "It's just spirit alcohol. Come, Yunqing. You and your friend have to try this stuff. It's really hard to find it anywhere in Eastwood City." With that, he waved a servant over to fill glasses for Hu Yunqing and Bai Xiaochun. Hu Yunqing looked a bit embarrassed. Despite the fact that his clan was quite well off, he had only ever once tried spirit alcohol brewed from Tier 1 high-grade spirit medicine. After hesitating for a moment, he smiled wryly and took a sip. Bai Xiaochun looked at the alcohol curiously. After sniffing it, he couldn't help but be disappointed. Clearly, the impurity levels were quite high. Li Yudao seemed very satisfied to see Hu Yunqing's reaction, but when he saw the expression on Bai Xiaochun's face, he was less than pleased. After looking him up and down, he decided that, not only would he put Hu Yunqing in his place, he would crush his friend at the same time. "Brother, are you not satisfied? Don't worry. This banquet we're throwing for Goddess Lingfei is a bit rushed, but we still managed to get some rare foods to serve. I've heard that Goddess Lingfei always talks about how much she misses the Spirit Stream sect. Therefore, the Li clan has spent a lot of money to get some spirit tail chickens to remind her of her home. Men, serve the spirit tail chicken." Laughing heartily, he waved his hand, and a servant rushed over carrying a golden platter. There on the platter was a fully roasted spirit tail chicken. The platter itself looked quite expensive, and as for the 3 colored spirit tails, they were arranged very artistically. The chicken had been roasted to a deep amber color, and looked extraordinary. Apparently, it had just come out of the oven, causing a wonderful aroma to fill the area. Quite a few other guests looked over in shock. A spirit tail chicken. Wow, the Li clan is so rich. Every table gets a spirit tail chicken? Look, those clearly weren't raised around here. Where did they come from? Hearing the reactions of those sitting in the area, Bai Xiaochun blinked in surprise. Isn't that just a spirit tail chicken? As soon as the words left his mouth, the beautiful young woman sitting next to Li Yudao scornfully said, "Prince Yunqing, your friend here really knows how to run his mouth. Isn't that just a spirit tail chicken? It makes it seem like he's eaten a lot of them." Li Yudao looked gravely at the young woman, as if he didn't approve of her tone. However, the truth was that he also felt that Bai Xiaochun was trying to be a big show-off. Inwardly, he was starting to get irritated, but outwardly, he made a polite explanation. Friend, I'm afraid you don't understand. These spirit-tailed chickens aren't ordinary in any way. They weren't raised by my Li clan, they're from the Spirit Stream sect. More specifically, they're from the south bank of the Spirit Stream sect. Even though his words were spoken softly, many people in the area heard them, and soon, gasps rang out. Even Hu Yunqing couldn't hold back from gasping at Li Yudao's display of wealth. Li Yudao was very pleased at the reaction he was getting from Hu Yunqing in the crowd. Looking very proud of himself, he continued to offer further explanation. The spirit-tailed chickens from the south bank of the Spirit Stream sect were rare enough to begin with. However, a few years ago, a bandit known as the chicken-thieving fiend caused a sharp decline in production. Nowadays, spirit-tailed chickens from the south bank can only be acquired at auction, and for an extraordinary price at that. They're very easy to identify. They have green bones and beautiful tail feathers. They look completely different from other types of chickens. However, he lamented, thanks to that despicable chicken-thieving fiend and his demented crime spree, the South Bank spirit-tailed chickens nearly went extinct. With that, he proceeded to curse and revile the chicken-thieving fiend. His female companion joined in, until all of the surrounding guests were echoing their sentiments. In response to everyone rebuking the chicken-thieving fiend, Bai Xiaochun cleared his throat awkwardly. It was at this point that a new group of people arrived, a group of handsome elite clan members from the cultivator clans, who were clustered around a young woman. She wore a long white gown that resembled a blooming lotus, had the fairest of skin, and had her long hair coiled up and bound with a silver hairpin. She wore pearls and jewelry, and walked with a gentle grace. The starlight which reflected in her eyes made her look even more beautiful. Unfortunately, her exquisite beauty was somewhat marred because of her furrowed brow. Apparently she was concerned with some important matter. And yet, she did her best to put a smile on her face as she conversed in a low tone with one of the young men escorting her. Although the young man did his best to conceal it, it was possible to see the passion in his eyes as he listened to her. That young woman was none other than Du Lingfei. She immediately became the focus of all attention. Furthermore, there was something about her, some energy or power that made everyone in her presence feel the urge to bow their heads. Despite how many people were clustered around her, Bai Xiaochun instantly caught sight of her. At first, he almost looked like he was in a daze. They hadn't seen each other for years, but she somehow seemed more familiar to him than ever. And yet, she was more beautiful than before. There was also something a bit more noble about her, perhaps something that had come from holding a position of power for so long. She definitely seemed different from the rude and unreasonable beauty she had been when they'd first met. And yet, as the moments ticked by, that old version of Du Lingfei and this newer, more beautiful one slowly merged together. Bai Xiaochun had grown in their time apart, and so had she. Thanks to her subtle control of affairs in Eastwood City, the cultivator clans were in harmony, something that most outsiders found unbelievable. Goddess Lingfei, Li Yudao said, his eyes flickering with infatuation. Back when he'd first laid eyes on her, he had been somewhat attracted to her. However, it was only thanks to her deft manipulation of the cultivator clans that he came to be fully infatuated. The courtesan sitting next to him paled in comparison, and she clearly knew that. In the face of the powerful Du Lingfei, she had no choice other than to lower her head. At this point, Hu Yunqing leaned over to Bai Xiaochun and quietly said, Goddess Lingfei came to Eastwood City with nothing. I remember her often gazing back in the direction of the Spirit Stream sect, thinking about something. Who would have ever thought that she would do so well for herself? None of the past emissaries ever accomplished what she has. She kept the peace between the clans, bringing about a harmony the likes of which has never been seen before. Supposedly, some of the clan patriarchs were so impressed that they convinced the Spirit Stream sect to renew her emissary commission several times over. Even as Li Yudao stared at her with glittering eyes, and Hu Yunqing was murmuring to Bai Xiaochun, Du Lingfei finished speaking to the young man next to her. Just as she was about to take a step forward, her gaze pierced through the crowd to land on Li Yudao's table. Her eyes went wide, and a tremor of disbelief ran through her. All of a sudden, it seemed as if everyone around her had vanished, leaving only one person behind in her world. Breathing heavily, she started walking in the direction of the table. Everyone was shocked to see her acting this way, especially Li Yudao, who shot to his feet, trembling. Shish, she's actually coming over to see me. His mind began to spin, and his heart began to pump wildly. Unable to prevent the joy from filling his face, he immediately began to walk toward her. Goddess Lingfei, he said. Even as he prepared more words to say, Du Lingfei walked right by without even sparing him a passing glance. His jaw dropped, and he looked stiffly over his shoulder to see Du Lingfei stop in front of the table and look at one person in particular. Bai Xiaochun, you're here. Even the way she stood there was enticing. Her eyes were beautiful, like shining moons, and everyone who looked at her couldn't prevent their hearts from surging with passion. The instant she spoke Bai Xiaochun's name, the clamor of the banquet transformed into utter silence. Trembling, people began to turn to look at Bai Xiaochun. Everyone knew that Bai Xiaochun was a prestige disciple of the Spirit Stream sect and the junior brother of the sect leader. The latest news was that he had recently gone to one of the Foundation establishment Holy Lands. Yeah, I'm here, he said, smiling. All of a sudden, he recalled that moment in the cave when they were fleeing from the Luokan, how she had sat next to the fire, her face ashen and yet oh so beautiful. Hu Yunqing plastered a look of surprise on his face. Taking several dramatic steps backward, and stumbling down to his knees in the process, he pointed his finger and raised his voice as loud as possible. Why you're Bai Xiaochun. It was at that exact same moment that people from the various cultivator clans began to pull jade slips out of their holding items, as news came in from their clans. Within moments, the surprise which had just gripped their heart turned into massive waves of shock. People began to gasp and look over at Bai Xiaochun, their minds reeling. All of the various jade slips contained similar information. Bai Xiaochun reached Heaven-Dao Foundation establishment. Any clan member who meets him should treat him with utter respect. Immediately notify the clan for a hefty reward. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.